afternoon, good morning, good whatever time your zone you're in. I am the Bleach Demon, and once again, I am joined by Fat Dave with Total Blackout Painting. And
Hello.
today we're going to take the Autist circle to Albrecht Durer. So
Yeah,
it's
we
kind of an exciting change. Again, Dave's pick because he's more the autist than I am. I mean, artist.
the artist autist. Yeah, so we're going with Albrecht Durer. He was a German painter from the Renaissance period. He um he was contemporary to Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Also Copernicus. Like there was so many big names that lived in the same time period as him. It's really amazing when I look back on it, or when we look back on it now. When we're like, oh my God, those so many, like in the 15th century in that Renaissance period, there were
Mhm.
so many people that just revolutionized human like thinking and art and everything, and they just brought so much. I don't know. There's a good reason we call it the Renaissance now, because it was when humanity was kind of bringing themselves back out of the Dark Ages.
Yeah, well,
So
it's interesting that there's just that many contemporaries at that time, and they all bring something very, very different to the table artistically. But
yeah,
there's also like one kind of weird, interesting thing is I noticed they use a lot more light in their illustrations and paintings than previous generations. It's kind of that dawning of the age of enlightenment kind of mentality.
yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, yeah, that was the Enlightenment. Well, it wasn't the Enlightenment for the later on, like
Not the official
not
enlightenment,
not
but
the
I'm
official one, but yeah.
yeah.
But it was like humanity was coming out of a darker period,
Hmm.
not and a more oppressive period of time. Um, and really, what it was an economic revolution, right? Like they'd
Yes.
started the economy had started growing and scaling. There was more trade. It just allowed humans to expand a lot.
And it
But it allowed.
also really gave that opportunity for humanity to have some leisure in a sense. And I'm not to call art technically a leisure, but when you're not scraping by for survival, there's time for other pursuits where you can
Oh,
trade
absolutely.
something, a beautiful creation for food. That does change things quite a bit.
Well, and this was an era of patronage also, where a lot of these artists were patrons to a wealthy family or a company even. Like they would like Durer
Hmm.
did a lot of illustrations for books. Um which really, like, the books and the printing press and all that stuff was really the beginning of this renaissance, and when they started being able to figure out the mass production of literature and everything.
Hmm.
um
What wasn't one of
and
his more famous, works, books on fortification for sieges and whatnot of that time period?
from Durer.
I believe so. Yeah, I just
it
did a quick biography
It
on
may
him.
it may have been. It may have been. I didn't encounter that. I've listened to a lot of stuff about this guy today, and just over the last week, and just soaking in, because it was amazing what he did. I mean, it was amazing what anybody. When you look at, I mean, as to us contemporary, it's us like modern day people. We look at how like their lives seem so fantastical, because I can't comprehend doing the kind of shit that this guy did, crossing the fucking snowy Alps. And not like crossing the snowy Alps in a train,
But doing it
not
on
crossing
foot,
this,
yeah.
yeah, on foot or in a caravan,
Hmm.
at best in a carriage, but still you have to cross the Alps, and it seems like such a daunting thing, but it was pretty routine back then. Like, not that it wasn't an accomplishment, but it was really routine.
Yeah,
So,
it's something that where I don't think we have a good appreciation for just how difficult transportation was, especially
right.
just for an individual, and then he's also going to be taking his art supplies because it's not like you can just
Yeah.
pull up at Italian Walmart in 1490 and still
Right.
have this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, not to say that there weren't studios, and a lot of the times when these guys traveled, they would travel to meet other artists, and
Hmm.
that's what he did a lot. He spent a lot of time traveling Europe, the same. He spent a lot of time in Finland again. He spent or not Fin. He spent a lot of his time in Italy.
Hmm.
So I got confused last week. Yeah, he spent a lot of his time in Italy. Um, again, learning from the masters, like learning from people like Da Vinci,
Hmm.
and the contemporaries, and learning from the people who taught Da Vinci. You know, like these guys are
Like Bellini,
these
I thought
masters.
was
Yeah,
someone who,
Bellini.
yeah,
Yeah, he studied with Bellini, like exactly. These, and it's amazing to think that like those guys had masters.
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like those guys all had artists that they looked up to and aspired to be as well. And it's a really, I think it's a really interesting thing, um, how uh, just look on the long view of history, how we venerate these people, um, and they're deserving of it, you know.
Well,
And
but but I'd say conversely, the problem is we don't humanize them like with a lot of historical figures like this, where we kind of, oh well, yeah, they did all this great things, like they were, it just happened. It's not like it took
right,
effort, vision, and I
right,
I think that's something with Duer, looking through his stuff. There were a lot of just visionary moments that he had, and also heavily involved with mathematics and this fortification uh, design, and to not look at that as like this guy could kind of do it all
oh,
is very humbling.
he was a genius. Not only was he, I mean, there were things like his father was a goldsmith.
Hmm.
He was born in Nuremberg. His father was a gold was a hung his father moved to Hungary, or moved to Nuremberg from Hungary, um, and was a goldsmith, and he didn't go into that because he was a really talented artist.
Hmm.
And um, there's a sketch that he did. He was studying with a master when he was a child, and there's a sketch that he did of himself when he's like 13. Um, that is amazing for a 13-year-old. It looks a lot. I mean, it's just what you'd expect from a Renaissance master.
Hmm.
Just a self-portrait and a little scribble on it. But so yeah, speaking of self-portrait, we'll jump into the first piece here.
Oh,
Um,
so,
the
actually, if I had been smart, I would have already had all this up because and oh, we did. Speaking of contemporaries, we did skip over one of my personal favorite, Hieronymus Bosch. Just
oh
what
yeah,
a trippy dude.
just they were so like people. We have a lot of artists now. We have a lot of people that can do amazing things now because we have about 100 times more people now than we did then,
Correct.
right? And so just by scale alone, like people that had this level of talent were so rare. And not only were these people rare, but people who could actually develop and take advantage of it were incredibly rare because
Hmm.
it's really it's really that mostly an aristocratic person can take on, right?
Yeah.
And but even then though, artists back then were kind of seen like metal workers, so not metal workers, but like silversmiths, or
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
the painter was about the same as the silversmith, whatever. They were all artisans. They all made stuff for a living.
So
um
some of the
they
decorative stonemasons, that level of detailed work, where
right,
it's kind of pulled back from the norms of society in a lot of ways.
yeah, yeah. But even back then, like especially in the Renaissance era, um, everything was still heavily Gothic influenced, all the architecture, but it was starting to change
Hmm.
and become like the more Renaissance style stuff, and and it really oh dang it, lost my train of thought. Yeah, well,
now that
oh
we've
yeah, but
derailed
the
you,
buildings. Well, no, okay, I remember it, but the buildings and all of that stuff was so intricate.
mhm.
Like especially anybody who had any kind of money had a really beautiful and amazing house, right? So, which and how would you maintain that, especially if you had a bit of money? Um, if you had a bit of money, and you may wanted to make sure that your place looked nice, you would hire a stonemason, and he would be your pay. You would pay him. He would be like on your salary.
Mhm.
Of course, that's what they did with the artists. Then,
Yes.
they would put the artists on a salary, and
And
yeah, and Durer was one of his uh one of
patrons was
his
Maximilian of the Holy Roman Empire, wasn't he?
yes, he was. And when Maximilian retired, his successor um did not want to continue to pay Durer's patronage,
Hmm.
his fee, whatever. And so Durer had to go lobby for it.
Hmm.
But by the time he had arrived to lobby for it, the Pope had died. That Pope had
Oh
died.
man.
And so it was like he had died, like, because it wasn't, I mean, it's like months journeys from
Yeah.
places. So
And, and
it's
and given that that was right around the time, Martin Luther and his diet of worms and all that
mhm.
was coming along, it's like I can see where this is an even more complicated period to be an artist wanting patronage.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there had to be so, I mean, it obtaining supplies, doing all that stuff, it can't be easy.
No, and
And so, or it couldn't have been easy. But there was, I mean, they did have a bit of a trade infrastructure for a lot of that stuff, but still, it's not, they didn't have Amazon,
no.
you know. So, but anyhow,
Yeah,
let's hop over
let's.
to that first painting there.
Yep. All right. So here we
So this
are.
is actually the first painting the only painting of his we're going to be covering. Um, because he was let's say he was like a true Renaissance man. He painted oils, watercolors, he sketched, he but he did prints. But I mean, his prints are amazing, but his painting is amazing too. And this is it's such an interesting piece to me.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of, like, that's one of the most interesting things about Durer is all the iconography and symbolism he puts into his work. Just kind
Yeah.
of weird little things. Like this forward facing pose. This forward facing pose is very rare for this period of time, save for pictures of Jesus. Um,
Hmm.
Pictures of Jesus were oftentimes in Renaissance paintings, the only person that was generally portrayed facing forward was Jesus.
That's
Um,
interesting. Yeah,
Except
that's
for, I mean, portraits and stuff like that.
right. But yeah,
But
but
in
you're right.
paintings.
When it's like general, because the head's turned or they're kind of like staring off into a middle distance.
Yep. Yeah, the standard Renaissance pose is
Okay.
the three quarter pose gaze. And so um there's a lot of cool stuff here. Now he did it like this to kind of set himself up as a Christ-like, is in a Christ-like image,
Hmm.
right? And not to, like, it's really controversial whether they thought he did it because if it was hubris, or if he did it because he was a very religious man
Hmm.
also. He was a follower of Luther.
Yeah.
He was big on Lutheranism
And
or Protestantism, when it first,
right.
he was a well, and I think a lot of that was because of his dealings with the church. And
I
of course by that
guarantee.
time he'd lost his patronage from the Pope.
Hmm.
on that. So yeah, so this is called um, Self-Portrait with Fur-Trimmed Robes. He painted this in 1500.
Okay.
So at the time he painted this, he was in his early 20s. Um, it was or he originally painted it in Nuremberg. Yeah, and it's got a little inscription up there on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Let's see if we can.
which says,
Oh, there we go.
yeah, Albertus Durer Norcius ipse effigium me anno Christo nato 1500 propria manu depictum sic oculos sic ora solidus.
Hmm.
And that is Albrecht Durer of Nuremberg painted this image of himself in the year 1500 with his own hand. Thus I looked, thus I acted.
Hmm.
So it's a really interesting, um, another kind of interesting self-important thing
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Um,
Yeah.
and oh, hey, we got Maureen.
Hey,
And yeah,
Maureen.
and then so let's look at the hand. Let's zoom in on the hand there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of the hand, he does one of his most famous works, and one of his works that was really popular was a drawing of praying hands that he did.
I've
And
seen
most
that
people have
as
seen it.
a watercolor as well.
Yeah. And so he did a lot with hands to try to he would sneak in this kind of, not sneak it in, but he would post stuff in a way. It's cool, and it does make that kind of like esoteric look to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the detail's great. It's not the realism of Repin, but it predates it. It predates him. So
Well, it's interesting because what really caught me, not just the hand, but you've got the fingernails, the wrinkles on the knuckles, the
mhm.
veins. Then you look at the fur on the collar of the coat coming through.
Oh
What a
yeah.
detail!
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. And the fur is really well done. Like that probably took him a minute to do.
Oh, well, and
Um,
it's not consistent fur. If you look at some of this higher section,
right.
it's
Well, which is reflective of what the fur would have been like back then,
exactly.
right? Like that. So it's a more realistic. It's probably. I mean, it's probably like he actually had the thing. Um, or probably actually had that coat.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
so
it's just such an amazing level of detail and skill that we'll be able to see on the woodcuts when we get to them.
yep. Yep. He also his hair was not this dark. If you look at many of the other paintings of him
Mm-hmm.
and drawings, his hair is not this dark. His hair is much lighter. Um, and so again, he painted this to kind of make himself look like a Christ-like figure in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Darkened his hair, and it's just really cool. The eyes have really good detail in them too. If you want to zoom in there.
Yep. And the eyebrows and the lashes.
Yep.
That's just remarkable work.
Yeah. Like the way he drew the highlight or the way he caught the highlight in the eyes is really cool. Like his use of light is really good. Um, his use of source lighting and everything. You can tell exactly where the sun's coming from.
Well,
And it's very consistent throughout the whole piece. It's really well done, which again, that's why he's a master.
and something
So
to me, it just looking at the reflection in the eyes, and you can see the way the window is.
yeah,
That's amazing to me.
yeah. It's a really cool detail to include, to just bring out more realism
Mm-hmm.
in the painting. And of course, another thing about this painting is that he's on a stark black background.
Yeah.
He's not on. There's no landscape behind him. Durer was known for his landscapes. He did some really amazing landscape paintings. Um, and and this is the way he just sits on that black background. Of course, it puts you right in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
he's looking right at you, and he's he doesn't have he has a very blank look on his face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just looking forward with his hand, blessing the viewer, like Marine said.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
and
it's just it's such a fascinating piece, and to think that this is a self portrait.
yeah, yeah. So a painting of himself, which is just it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we don't know exactly how accurate it was because we don't have photographs.
Right, but
You know,
we can presume that it's
but
pretty accurate.
yeah, and we have a lot of paintings from a lot of different people. That's kind of one of those things. Those guys tend to paint each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the last thing I want to point out on this before we jump on to the next one is the signature, the AD, his little inscription there.
Mm-hmm.
So AD 1500, that symbol right there, was probably one of the smartest things he did, because it was something that was like almost like a trade. It was like a copyright mark, like it was a stamp
Mm-hmm.
on his work, so that you could verify it or be sure that it was his work. And that's on every one of his paintings. Every one of his paintings. That AD, that A that's shaped like a kind of like a gate,
Mm-hmm.
with the D.
You know,
And so we'll find that in all the inscriptions too.
I read through again, skimming through his fascinating biography. It talks about him kind of developing his own fonts, essentially, and I just can't help but wonder if this is in either what led him to do that or was a derivative of what he had done, because it's just so unique and fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so like I say, I never think of myself as an artist. I never really signed my paintings unless someone specifically wanted me to sign one.
Mm-hmm.
So I never developed my own signature or anything like that. Um, but at a point, it is kind of like having like a stamp. It's something to make sure a mark of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And especially since his primary business was printing,
Right.
was prints, not painting. He did a lot of painting, but the vast majority of what he did and how he made his wealth was through doing prints. So
I think that
if you
might
want to
be
jump over to the next one.
there we go.
Yeah.
Great minds and all. Yes.
Yeah. So this is an engraving, a copper engraving, which the copper engravings are special because you can get a lot more richness in the images of a copper engraving, but they have a much more limited lifespan.
Mm.
They break down a lot quicker than the wood carvings do.
Right.
So, so that's really like he made a lot of his money by making prints of his engravings and selling those. And again, so very similar to Repin that we talked about last week, about how Repin and the Wanderers wanted to bring, like one of their things was they wanted to bring art to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it wasn't just that because they wanted to make art that was relatable to the people. And so really what Durer wanted to do was give great art to the people. Give like the average person the ability to observe and appreciate great and beautiful art, maybe even in their own home. Like but then also because he was part of the printing business, then a lot of this, like I said, he was commissioned by bookmakers a lot to make art for books.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was a very talented engraver, as we can see in this image here, which is it's called Nemesis, or the Great Fortune, in German, Das große Glück.
Hmm.
So the let's
Yeah, we'll go on in.
zoom in on it. So you can see there's an angel carrying a goblet and a bridle. And the detail on this, when you think that this was carved into a copper plate as a negative,
Yes.
like carved backwards, and it's like carved backwards and inside out,
Mm-hmm.
basically, to get this. Um,
That that just blows
and
my mind with any engraving like this to this level of
right,
detail, but as an inverse.
right, and it's all done by hand. There's no machines. I mean, even now, copper engraving is largely done. Like it's still done by hand, using one tool, uh, a little square metal tool to carve out channels of metal,
Mm-hmm.
and then you carve out cross hatchings and all the stuff like that. So, um, let's zoom in on the bridle really quick, just to see the detail on that,
Oh,
because the
wow.
chain, um, never mind that caked up, but the but to think that this is carved into copper and then pressed in here,
Mm-hmm.
it's so fascinating to me to see how the the small stroke, like each line is a small, just a small scoop of metal, just a small scoop of metal. And the way that robe flows is done so well. Like it's so rich and detailed. It's just amazing the way it catches your eye.
What also gets me with the bridle with the bit.
Hmm.
It's one of those twisted metal types, and he's done it. It's not just a solid
Yeah,
piece across. It's got the detail.
just that minute detail in there. It's super amazing. Um, and let's scroll down. Let's look at the landscape below
I'm
this.
I've been drooling over that since you sent me these.
It's so cool. So this is inspired by uh, a view of the South Tyrol from the Alps that he saw. Like when we were talking about, he was crossing the Alps.
Mm-hmm.
He was crossing the Alps, and he looked down and saw this village. Um, they probably had time to make a sketch of it or
Mm-hmm.
something. And if not, what an amazing way to like what an amazing mind to remember that level of detail,
Yes, and even
or
if
to
it's
be able to
just
capture it.
like bits and pieces here that he pushed together to create something fictional.
Hmm.
It's not something that you would just slap together without inspiration.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it because you've got the various classes in town being represented,
Hmm.
and even the cemetery over here on the left hand side of the screen with the little cross and yeah,
Oh yeah.
the stonework up there.
Yeah.
It's amazing work.
Yeah. And this is one single piece of copper. It's not like uh, a, a it's not like a bunch of small plates put together,
Hmm.
or a bunch of big plates put together. These aren't big. It's not huge. Um, because of course it had to go through a printing press, and there was only so big they could make things. So
Yeah,
it had to be a good size for a printing press.
and
And
and I'm
and
willing
so
to bet it's a little bit large, yeah, a little bit smaller than a standard sheet of 8.5 by 11.
I think the
Or
original
were they,
is. Let me get to my source on it. I got to get back to my.
or was this a larger print that they could reduce in size over time? But
Well, they would. I mean, they can always reduce them to through reproduction and stuff.
hmm
They'll lose detail, of course.
yeah,
I've got to get back to my friggin'. Sorry. I got to get back to my damn link.
yeah. While you're doing that, I'm just looking at the details on the roofs
Okay.
on the houses. The fact that there's a little fire outside of town.
Yeah. Yeah, this is 13 by 9.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just a little bit bigger than a standard sheet of paper. Just a little bit bigger. Like, and that level of detail to be carved into copper. Of course, he had to use copper for this because you couldn't get. He did some amazing woodcuts, but you can't get this level of detail in a woodcut.
No.
Um, because you can't get really fine lines in wood. Um,
Well, you're
and
you're fighting
also,
the grain with that. So.
right. And printing with wood and printing with copper is two different processes also. Um, because it's an inverse image versus a standard image.
Okay.
Because with the wood, you're not reversing the image at all. You're just putting the image down on the paper as it's on the thing.
Hmm.
So it's not. But and they're more durable. Um, and so you could get more prints out of a woodcut print than you could out of these copper ones, which is why they just made them even that much more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when you think about, so you've got something with a very limited lifespan, and we're talking what, probably in the neighborhood of, say, 200 prints, just for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
And but these are all being mass produced, and there's going to be some imperfections between each one, just the nature of printing at that time.
Yep.
And I'm willing to bet most of them captured this level of detail, each and every one. That's an amazing feat to really
Right.
get, yeah, something where you've got maybe one of the best scenes I have looked at all week when it comes to something, even compared to a photograph. This is much better. It's
Right.
more evocative of the imagination. You can kind of imagine how this town functions.
Right.
And the one thing I do notice is a lack of people, with the exception of what looks like a guy fishing off the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot of people in there, but that was probably a like they might be too small of a detail thing.
Hmm.
Like such a tiny detail that it's unnecessary. Um, so it could be he was so far away he couldn't see the people. So
Yeah.
you know,
I
but really, I
think I spotted the second person. There's a
oh
Landsknecht
yeah, there's
over
some
there.
yeah, there you go. No, but it really highlights to me the like we take advantage, we take for granted the idea of reproducibility,
Hmm.
right? Because we have digital images, they can be infinitely reproduced. But back then, these things weren't permanent, and even then, like this print was less impermanent than most paintings in a way, but at the same time, because it's more or less just a sheet of paper,
Hmm.
and it's like a sheet of slightly larger notebook paper,
Yeah.
right? Like if he got 200 or 300 prints out of one of those, of course, they just get destroyed by time over the ages, right?
Well,
Because
yeah.
it's actually a far less durable medium than a painting.
Hmm.
Because it's just a piece of paper with ink on it.
And
So
paper manufactured at that time didn't have the stability that it does now.
right.
So,
And some of the inks that people used were not good long term, stuff like that.
the iron
Um,
gall inks, especially, yeah,
yeah. Well, like let's look at the feathers on this. Look at the wings really quick on this one
yeah.
before we move on to the next one.
And Maureen can get more bum viewage off of that. You're welcome, Maureen.
Like that is such a it's such a cool. There's so much cool detail. It's and of course because it's Renaissance, the proportions are a little weird,
Hmm.
you know, but the level of detail in the feathers is just so cool.
Well,
And um and like in the goblet and everything, there's just so much the level of detail in it is so amazing to think that a this is a carved into a piece of copper of slightly smaller or slightly bigger than a piece of paper.
yeah. And looking at the wings, each feather in the wing is not the same. and there's little
Yeah.
flaws in them.
Yeah. Yeah. They're little. Each one have little imperfections here and there. It's like you can tell he spent a lot of time. He didn't like just. I mean, of course, you just get into the flow, and I'm sure, but
Right, but still.
but he did intend for the detail, um,
And I think it's
which
something
is really
where
interesting.
you'll just you look at the shading in it. That's another impressive thing. Using this, shading on this kind of format
Hmm.
really takes skill. You're basically making decisions. Okay, how much do I leave in, and how do I make it detailed enough where it looks not just like a black blob?
Right. Right. Like, and it's so, again, he's so masterful. It's
Hmm.
again, be masturbatory and keep saying he's a master, but it really is what made him a master
Well,
was
I mean,
the ability to know
you
how to
are
do that
saying
stuff.
this is
Yeah.
master bait, so
uh, so this is Nemesis, and the theme. So we'll run over the themes of the painting here real quick before we jump to the next one. Is that
hmm.
um, so they're not sure. So it's called Nemesis,
Okay.
um, and the Great Fortune, and so they it could allude to being either Nemesis, the Greek goddess of retribution and divine judgment,
Hmm.
or Fortuna, the Roman goddess of fortune, um, of both good and bad fortune. So, but it is called the Great Fortune, so it could be either, um, but it could uh, either one works out, right? Because of
Yeah.
what the angel's holding, the bridle. The bridle is meant to represent control, self-control, and restraint. Um, and then the goblets typically they represent abundance. And so it's maintaining restraint during a land of abundance, really about self-control,
Hmm.
about self-restraint. And again, yeah, those who indulge without any control may provoke retribution. Um,
Hmm.
so,
That's just
which
such
is
a fascinating way to interpret that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the idea of the decadence, or the decadence of excess, basically,
Hmm.
um, was even held then. You know, of course, because it's kind of a Christian ideal.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so but
Now.
again, they're all and all of his paintings are packed with symbolism. There's
Hmm.
just all sorts of different things you look into them. Um,
And
and
do we have a
go ahead.
date for this particular one?
Oh, this
Oh
was
yeah.
done between 1501 and 1502. Yeah.
There we go.
So after the painting, the self portrait.
Okay.
I think we're
I'm
going to be
just
going through these in ascending. Eric, yeah, they're going to
okay.
get older as we go on.
I'm because that it's just one of those. I'm going to find it interesting to see if his Christian symbolism evolved as he got older. So, and
I,
a crude joke does have to be made. The only reason that the little cape is flying is because of the proximity to the butt. You're welcome, Maureen.
it's because of that caked up angel.
That's right. uh,
uh, so that one. Let's move on to the next one.
all right.
So he did 3 engravings that were called his master engravings, 3 copper engravings that were considered his finest works, widely considered his finest works, and I think that he probably considered them that too. And this is the first one. It's called Night, Death, and the Devil, and it has there's a lot packed into this one.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, it has the knight in the middle, and let's zoom in on him. So he's and it's so like it's funny because when you're zoomed out, it looks a little muddy, but when you zoom in, you just get to see how crisp the lines are, how crisp everything
Yes.
is. Um, so this is a crusading knight,
Mm-hmm.
and he's meant to represent moral Christian or moral values. You know, he's meant to like righteousness.
Yeah, kind of the
And then
the
behind
St.
him,
George motif.
yeah. And behind him to his right over his shoulder on the left is death, holding an hourglass, and that really symbolizes the impermanence of mortality. Right, like he symbolizes death, but death is really just the end of our mortality. And that we have time. You better hurry up.
Yeah,
because you got time. Your time's running out on you. And then behind him, to the right, that goofy pig nose guy is supposed to be the devil. Of course, the devil, he represents sin and temptation. The kind of trying to lure or
restrain.
Or restrain. Or
you see that one arm coming up and trying to grab him.
Yeah, he's trying to grab him. I'm trying to molest the knight. I mean, and not like gross, but he's just trying to harass him in a way, but the knight has a very like steadfast look on his face. He's paying no heed to these people.
These distractions.
He's ignoring sin. He's ignoring temptation. He's ignoring his imminent mortality to stay on the path of righteousness.
Well,
and so let's scroll down.
Just looking at the hourglass, and it's not as if his time is fully run out either. That I find interesting.
Yeah, that's a good detail. But then down here we see the dog.
Yep.
And the dog in his works, they tend to symbolize something, and dogs like this would symbolize loyalty. And so the knight is steadfastly marching forward. He's ignoring evil and he's ignoring death, and he's being very loyal on his path to righteousness. And then of course you see the skull, which represents death always.
Well, it also represents Adam in certain Christian motifs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you see his signature there, 1513 on the little plate right there.
I also like the little lizard.
You can see the nails. Yeah.
But yeah, the nails.
Yeah, and the lizard's moving the lizard's moving the other way too. And so he's running towards the devil. So I don't know what the lizard symbolizes. But it could be, because I haven't seen a lot of his work, but it could be that he, it's moving backwards with the devil, and it could also mean that he is not, or that reptile is moving away from the devil. So he's eschewing the reptile. Could be. But yeah, the horse, you can see nails in the horse's hooves from the shoes. You can see the horseshoes.
And it's not
Renaissance people always kind of struggled with dogs. Maybe dogs just looked funny back then, but dogs and cats in Renaissance paintings are always a little weird.
Yes.
And so maybe animals just looked different back then.
I'll go with that argument just for the sake of it,
But let's scroll down to the very bottom one where there's one little thing down there. So if you look at the very bottom by the hoof there, which probably it's right behind your avatar on the screen.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's like a little flower. Like
a
little crushed flower.
It's almost like crushed innocence in a sense.
Yeah. So let's scroll up and look at the top half of the picture. So there in the background, you can see the castle, which is just such a cool detail. And especially, so this painting.
That's something that I could see a lot of lesser artists leaving out and just focusing on the main motif.
Yeah. Again, and this etching, this carving is 10 inches by 7.5 inches. So it is much smaller than a piece of paper. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and like you can scroll in and look at the armor, look at the detail, or I mean, you can look at the detail in the armor and scroll in. You can look at the detail in the armor and like the detail in the shoulders, the rivets on the chest. Um, and the way that you can really make out the knight's face like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And the expression, not just that he has a face.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. It's it's just such an amazing thing that he did this and got this much detail into such a small space, just on a sheet of copper.
Yeah. Well, it's something where I'm looking at it's by the lance he's carrying, that little hooked piece. That's a detail
Oh
that's
yeah, on his
not
armor,
needed, but it's like that way he could steady the lance. That's
right?
wild to
Yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, because that's actually something that would be on armor. So it's a really, it's a great, not just like character study and whatnot. It's a really interesting landscape.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting background. The whole thing. There's so much to this image that like you can just sit there and look at it forever and find, it's one of those things you'll find more and more details as you go on.
Yeah, it I'm just looking at all of the like with the branches on the trees up there and the
Yeah.
roots and all these little things that you don't need. You don't need to to tell the story, but they're
Right.
there and you can just study it. I mean, even the girth on the saddle here has a decoration, a detail that
Yeah.
would be
It's got a
common
little
at that
hat.
time.
Yeah. And yeah, it just blows my mind. You know, on a friggin' piece of paper sized sheet of copper.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
let's jump to the next one.
well, before we
Because
do
we're
that, just another
okay.
interesting symbolic detail. Death's nag is wearing a bell around its neck. That's I can't remember what it's
Oh
symbolic
yeah.
of, but that's a neat little detail.
Yeah. Yeah, he did do a lot of like I mean, he did a lot of symbolic imagery. Like he did a lot of scenes from Revelations
Hmm.
and stuff.
So, all right.
So
So we'll
yeah,
go
we'll
on to the
jump to the
next.
next one. This is the second of that series, the Master Engravings. It's called Melancholia 1. Um,
Hmm.
the theme of it is his because this is where it kind of seems like maybe the dude was a little emo, in a way. Um, because this is a very like it's called melancholy because it's about boredom in a way,
Hmm.
right? Um, Also, melancholia was one of the humors
Yep.
of the time. So an imbalance of melancholia would make you sad or whatnot. But then also Agrippa, who was also a contemporary of them.
Hmm.
Uh, People think that Durer used was thinking of his the melancholy level 1 or the melancholy 1, which is that of the artist and the intellectual.
Hmm.
Um, which often comes down to kind of intellectual paralysis
Hmm.
and eventual like apathy, but then the ennui to create and the inability to do so because of the apathy is very frustrating.
Hmm.
um, so this piece is really thought to be um, Durer, because he was so religious. He
Hmm.
was a follower of Martin Luther, right? And
Right.
but even then Durer understood that the limits of human knowledge.
Hmm.
um, and so he desperately fought with that. Had a hard time reconciling the that gap between humanity and the divine, between the divine knowledge.
Mhm.
And so this is said to, in a way, symbolize that the his frustration in that regard. And so it follows with the, you be righteous and stay on the path. You eschew, you don't worry about your mortality and you don't worry about sin.
Mhm.
You stay the path. Um, but then in doing so can lead to frustration and ennui.
Yeah.
It can lead to um, it can lead to like boredom. But
Yeah,
it's not.
it's not really boredom. It's just like
It's
this
not.
desperate desire to create, but you're unable to because you're so focused on, well, what do I create? What do I
Right.
do?
Right. And so let's zoom in on the angel's face. There's a few things we'll look at real quick on this. So the angel's face, you can see she has the it's kind of staring off in a very, I don't know, frustrated way. Or
Hmm. Kind of that, 1,000-yard stare idea where you're just looking into
yeah,
a middle distance that has no real meaning.
yeah. And then there's a little cherub next to her sitting on the millstone.
Hmm.
Um Wait, and then the scales above that for justice, and then there's the numerology chart above that. There's just all sorts of
Which,
crazy stuff.
looking at that numerology chart, it's like, what in the hell is going on here?
I have seen a few things about that because it's a standard. Um, so the way it is set up in order to solve it, the lines will cross. The lines will cross in a symmetric way, and the way will kind of outline the A and the D.
Oh, I can
So that's
see
one of the
that
thoughts
now.
of it.
Yeah.
Um, but
Huh.
again, there's so much stuff in this. The hourglass, again, time's running out.
And the weird thing is, it's the same position of the hourglass in this as it
Hmm.
was in the other one.
Yep. And then there's the town, the little town in the background there behind the ladder.
Mhm.
And then there's a friggin' comet in the sky. Like
Yeah.
he drew a comet in the sky, and you can see the reflections from the comet in the water.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then that's a bat holding the excuse me,
Melancholia
holding up
and I.
the name of the name of the piece.
Hmm.
So
It's
let's scroll down and
uh,
let's look at we'll start at the so there's the dog. Um, Again, another dog in the piece, but this one's different because it's laying there weak.
mhm.
You can see its ribs, it's starving.
Yeah.
Um, it's wasting away instead of
That like that vibrant
maintaining its
dog.
faithful journey.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. So instead of so it's like his faithfulness about the journey is waning away. It's dying. You lose your vision.
Mhm.
Um, and you lose your fidelity and you lose your vision, and then your vision, you're and then you're stuck. Basically. And it's interesting because there's a lot of tools in this image too. There's a lot of woodworking tools
Mhm.
down there at the bottom, stoneworking tools. There's a molding. Um,
Yep. Lot of
and it's architecture. Yeah, there's some architecture tools. There's some nails. Um, there's a lot of stuff down there,
mhm. Yeah.
and so that kind of is there's the work. There's the work at his feet.
Mhm.
The tools are at their feet, ready to be used. He's
Yeah.
holding a stylus in his hand, ready to do something. Um, but yet nothing comes.
Yeah,
So,
it's fascinating, and then you get his little signature 1514 AD,
uh-huh.
and yeah, it's interesting looking at, just everything is ready, the stone is ready to be used, and you've
Yep.
got the found, the little foundry item in the background, ready to be used.
Hmm.
And yet there's no motivation. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, in that, like, the stone that's right there,
Mm-hmm.
um, the geometric shape, it's meant to represent kind of earthly knowledge. The shape of geometry is that's the knowledge of man,
Mm-hmm.
and the material limits of our understanding. And then the hourglass again, yeah, is the mortality. The memento mori
Mm-hmm.
is saying, um, you know, your time's running out.
Yep. It, and also it just another little detail. The keys.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's very symbolic of keys in Catholic art of
Hmm.
the keys for the papacy and whatnot. So that's an
Right.
interesting detail with him being a backer of Luther, and
Hmm.
it's just all of that detail. Hello, cat.
I thought I heard the cat. Oh, but yeah, there's all these tools and everything laying around. There's the keys. There's a lot of stuff. There's all the tools you need to do something are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're just waiting to be used. Um, but the angel is too, I don't know, wistful or melancholy to
Melancholy,
actually,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, to actually do it.
It's
So
just yeah, it's an interesting piece, but bat that is a rather peculiar creature.
mhm. Yeah. Well, Renaissance artists had a tenuous relationship
With
with
nature.
animals. Some of his best work too was studies of nature,
Hmm.
because he captured some things with such great realism. Um, but it had to be a study of nature.
Hmm.
you know,
Interesting.
he probably couldn't get a starving dog to lay down for him for too long.
No,
So
that is a gorgeous piece.
it's so cool. And again, this is another one that is it. This one is, yeah, 9.5 by 7, 9.5 by 7.5, basically.
Hmm.
So about the size of a piece of notebook paper.
Wild, absolutely
So
wild.
let's move on to the last one.
Okay.
So we're bumping up against our hour.
Yeah. It's hard to not go over, but
Right, right.
we're trying to be organized. I swear.
This is Saint Jerome and his study. This is the final one, um, and it really it's meant to symbolize the like kind of coming to peace with your religious life, and there's no melancholy here. There's I mean, it's a very peaceful scene. It's a very
Yeah,
like
it's kind of like a quiet morning kind of a
it
scene.
is. Yeah, I would say it's a devout scene. Um, so again, there's a few things in here for the symbolism. There's shit tons of symbolism in them.
Mm-hmm.
Because Saint Jerome was a scholar, and the way he's studying is meant to signify, study,
Mm-hmm.
the contemplative, like, peaceful life that comes with study.
Yep.
And then there's a crucifix and a skull. So if you zoom in on his eyes, his face,
They're
you
looking
can see
right at the crucifix.
he's no, they're looking at the skull.
Ooh.
He's looking at the
Oh.
skull past the
Yeah.
crucifix.
Yeah.
So he's noticing, he's noticing his death. Um, maybe looking at his death past his faith
Mm-hmm.
at this point. But while we're zoomed in here, look at the friggin' sun shining through the goddamn windows. Look at
That's
that detail.
amazing.
Isn't that like
And at the
he
correct angles. That's what gets me.
right? Right? Like there are some things in here that have a little bit of a goofy perspective. Like the bench next to, or the chair next to the desk, has just a little. It's got a little trim in it.
Mhm.
Um, but and the way the hourglass and the hat are overlaid.
Yeah.
But still, the detail in there is it's astonishing. It's astonishing
It is. I mean,
being able to get
and
get
again,
that reflection like that.
looking at the hourglass, it's roughly the same time as on the other two that we looked at with hourglasses.
Yeah. Yeah.
There has to be
So
some internal symbolism with that for Durer.
it could be. But then also, I mean, there's a lot of, so there's more things in here. Well, look at the lion and the dog down at the bottom, and then there's the gourd up there.
Yep.
So the lion is a symbol of Saint Jerome.
Yep.
There's the story where Saint Jerome tamed the lion, and this is a European lion,
Mm-hmm.
which are now extinct.
Yep.
And then there's the little dog sleeping, and the existence of the dog and the lion there next to each other is meant to symbolize peace and serenity. It's a it's a cozy little scene.
Oh, right. And referencing, lambs will lay down with lions, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
it's interesting.
And so it's kind of the full, the steadfastness of your journey,
Mm-hmm.
and then the melancholy that can overtake you,
Mm-hmm.
or that can hit you along the way. And then towards the end of your life, the slow contemplative life.
Yeah.
The peaceful contemplative life. Like, look at the grain in the freaking wood on the ceiling there.
It's got knots in it. That's just
Yeah.
so cool to see.
In a print.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the size of this one? Yeah, just under the size
This
of
is
a sheet of
it's the
paper?
same thing.
Yeah.
Yep, just under the size of a sheet of paper. So they're all 9.5 by 9. It's just amazing.
It really is. And like the plaster being imperfect back along by that
Mhm.
back post.
Oh wow! Like what a cool detail. I mean, the tools hanging on the wall behind him.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the cardinal hat right above him, which is
Yep.
meant to also denote Saint Jerome's um, religious authority.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gourd is supposed to be a reference to the Book of Jonah, but I'm not familiar enough with that to know what it's about. I just read that,
I'd
so
have
I
to
don't
double
know.
check
But
that myself.
yeah, but it's still, it's in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
The gourd's in the foreground, which makes it kind of stand out.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool detail.
And it's just a good way to fill up what's kind of a blank space in this piece as well.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Without having to do something too super detailed, but
Mhm. And yet because it's Durer, it's detailed enough so it doesn't just look like a blob.
right. Yeah. So, um, this is it's and again, sheets of copper, and these were printed out and sold to common people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, common people who could afford them.
Well, yeah, the merchant
You know,
class, the people that aren't doing patronage of people like Durer.
right.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the
yeah,
market.
the serfs weren't buying art generally.
Right. Although,
But I bet there were a few that maybe saved up their money and got a print or two.
yeah,
You know,
or would inherit it from someone who was able to afford it and that sort of thing.
yeah. It wasn't like people just because they were dirt poor didn't mean they didn't love art. Everybody wanted art. Nobody had access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody understood um, nobody understood the importance of it to them until they actually did until they actually did get to experience it. Um, and again, the printing press which is why that's how he was able to do these, um, because he was a printmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and he was able to spread this far and wide, and he was able to support himself and you know bring the world amazing art.
That- It's just such an evocative scene because it you could imagine walking in on this and then to have this basically aimed towards the middle classes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it shows kind of a visionary beyond just the art.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And again, it reflects his religious fervor,
Mm-hmm.
his devotion, because this is a very religious scene.
Yes.
Um, it's a scene of quiet reverence, of reflection and contemplation. Um, you know, he's contemplating his own death
Mm-hmm.
while studying the scripture. While
Yeah.
coming to peace um with his life. You know,
Yeah. That it's just such a intricately detailed scene, but it's yeah, it's very. I'm not sure quite. I would use peaceful, but it's like someone who has come to grips with everything that they are, and there's no concern anymore. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you know, he is contemplating his death.
Mm-hmm.
He's contemplating his morality. He's nearing his morality. And he's seeing his savior, but he's seeing death past that.
Mm-hmm.
So his savior can't save him from death.
Right.
Um, and so, um, yeah,
Hmm.
be faithful. Resist sin and temptation. Don't let your vision die, and you can have a serene and when you're older and you've lived your happy life, you can then contemplate your mortality
Mm-hmm.
because it's not worth it before that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent message. Just in general, not just in this piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All
So
right. Well, I
we're just
think
yep.
that's probably a good place to wrap for the day since we're over our yeah, over our
Yep.
planned time. So, any final thoughts you'd like to throw out?
I think we can put the link to this in the description, the link to the thing in the description. I'll have to fix the permissions on it. um but no, I'm thank you for doing this with me, man. I really do appreciate you coming along with me on this journey and looking at, like, to sound all dopey, um
No,
to just to
it's
just
fascinating because
yeah,
I noticed there's not a lot of people in our space that want to talk about the esoteric, about art, things of that nature.
right,
And
right,
I think I'm having a lot of fun. I'm learning quite a bit. Yeah, I've seen some of Durer's work, but I've never really put together all the pieces of who he was. So this has been really cool.
yeah. So I'd say before we take off, or before we end, I guess let's say thanks to Marine and Bobcat and Bezic and anybody else, Malox, who showed
Malux,
up in the
yep,
chat. And we are trying to do this. We are trying to do this weekly.
correct.
I think
Now,
there will
well,
be something different next week,
next
or for
week
the
and
next few
for
weeks.
next 2 weeks, I'm going on a bit of personal hiatus with some traveling. But I plan on dropping in one, maybe two parts, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock that we pre-recorded a while back, and that's a fun look, fun dissection of probably one of the most important poems that I've ever read.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then
Yeah, that'll start
once
another thing.
yeah,
So yeah,
well, I'll try to corral you for now. But yeah,
yeah,
we're trying to make this a regular series. Trying to do every Tuesday at 7 Eastern, whatever
it's
time zone
5 Mountain.
everybody else is, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think we're just talking about maybe doing Fritz Lang at some point, and
Yep. We're gonna do
definitely
Frank Frazetta at some point too.
yep.
Um, and there's some comic book artists that I think would actually be worth a look too. But yeah, well, we've got plans.
Yeah, that
So
yeah. And when we have to do a hiatus, we're gonna try to get some pre-recorded stuff thrown in there into the mix, and it's been a lot of fun so far. I hope to keep going.
hell yeah.
All right. Well, on that that fantastic note, I think it's time that we check out. Thanks
All right.
everybody. Thanks Dave.
Yep. Chattelay, folks. Thanks, Bleach.